Hey everyone, and welcome to another Konoha Reviews. Today we take a look at the recently released game Man of Medan, which is the first of a series of small horror games that will be part of a bigger collection known as the Dark Pictures. Each game in the Dark Pictures series will be a standalone story, and if we would take this first entry, the Man of Medan, as a measuring pole, it will take around 3 to 4 hours to complete. Now 3 to 4 hours is a bit steep for a $30 game, but I have to say that I was a big fan of the developer's previously released game Until Dawn. Though I made a comparison and stated that the similar game in genre Detroit Become Human was objectively the better game, I still enjoyed Until Dawn more since the tempo was higher, the characters were likable, and the horror aspect was a welcome one and very well executed. So with the Man of Medan and its short campaign, it's about half the length or even less maybe than that of Until Dawn, there comes a few problems, but also some new opportunities. I will begin with the positives in a bit, but let's talk about the story first. In the Man of Medan, we follow 5 young adults who go out to sea for a diving expedition where they find a plane wreck from World War II. While the dive takes place, 3 mysterious strangers stumble upon their ship and things escalate from there, with everyone eventually finding a seemingly haunted freighter. The characters this time around are more archetypes, and though Until Dawn's characters were certainly archetypes as well, with the nerdy kid, the cheerleader type, the jock, or the joker, many of them did have quite a bit of character development throughout. Until Dawn was just written very well. The types of horror that were used were different genres, and there were cool and unexpected twists that were really good, including the identity of the flamethrower man, the Wendigo, and Josh's real intentions. Man of Medan, unfortunately, has none of this. The characters never change or grow in personality over the span of this adventure. There's simply no time. You feel like they are still the exact same as they were at the beginning of the game when you finish it. There are also no real twists to be had, though when they do try to explain why everything is happening for a reason, it's a conclusion that I as a player had come to literally hours before. In some ways, it feels a bit rushed. The game works in some ways very similar to Until Dawn, much like games in this genre do anyways. But it still bears more of a resemblance to Until Dawn compared to others like The Walking Dead or Heavy Rain. One way, for example, that it bears resemblance is that you can stumble upon paintings throughout the game that, when inspected, show you a few seconds of a possible scenario that is still to come, and hopefully you can find some sort of hint as to what choice to make to avoid this. Until Dawn had this with the totems. But here too it is simplified, not to a good point. In Until Dawn there was, for example, another reason to collect these totems. With each one you collected, a brief moment from an audio log got added that explained the backstory of what was going on. That is not the case here, giving less incentive to gather all the paintings. The UI and menus also resemble that of Until Dawn very much, which is not a bad thing at all. The big trope with this game, however, is that you can play it co-op. Now, if you watched my review of Detroit Become Human, you know that I actually play all of these type of games as if they were co-op since Heavy Rain. When Heavy Rain was first released, me and a friend played it together where each of us would play as 2 characters. When Detroit was released, me and my girlfriend played that where I played as Connor and Marcus, and she would play as Kara. And when Until Dawn came out, me and my girlfriend played that too, where I would play as all the guys and she would play as all the girls. It just makes the overall experience a lot more fun and engaging, and it's tense since the story continues even if one of you loses a character, and I always recommend people to play these type of games this way. I'm very glad to find out that those pleas are now also been heard by the developers, that they made this possible. I hope to see this type of co-op games then also more in the future. Ironically though, I was not able to play this particular game co-op, since I have no friends who are interested in horror games, and my girlfriend won't be back for another week, who's on vacation now. Despite not having played it, I did do some research on how it works. You can either play it co-op online with 2 players, where the 5 are divided amongst you 2, and the cool thing here is that some of the scenarios take place at the same time. The earlier mentioned diving expedition is a perfect example of this. While one player is down in the water and exploring the plane wreck, the other player is back on the boat, making sure everything is alright. Though it is a neat idea, there's not a whole lot of excitement happening, and when one were to play this single player, it actually feels a bit awkward. Both scenarios play right after each other and are set on a timer until a scripted event happens that links both scenarios to each other and continues the story. When the timer runs out, even if you are currently in a dialogue or a cutscene, it cuts it off, whatever you're doing, abruptly and goes on. It's a bit sloppy. Nevertheless, it is still cool that you will get to make choices during your sections which the other person will not see, and some of these choices will have consequences for the other players. In fact, certain choices that you make during the game can actually kill the other player. I lost 2 of the 5 characters by the end of the game, and I'm pretty sure that with one of them, that is exactly what happened. You can also play this game couch co-op, and one can play that with 2 up to 5 players, where one passes the controller around. The issue here, however, is that the amount of playtime can differ very much with each character. So much so to the point where with one particular character, a choice can be made to escape on a small boat, which will result in the character never coming back until the very end cutscene. Therefore, I will say though that playing with 5 is not recommended. Playing with 3 people will be a better number. So let's now come back to the positives and the negatives that come with the shortened playtime of this game. I will start with the one positive. Many games like this, including Heavy Rain, Walking Dead, and Until Dawn, say that the choices made in their game actually matter, but in reality, it doesn't really. Most of the time, choices will only change what dialogue is being said or how a certain scene plays out, which will always then continue with the same next scene regardless of what choice was made. Having only 3.5 to 4 hours of playtime here makes it to where the creators actually were able to make choices having a much higher consequence, but also increase the tempo. As I said, one of the characters you can actually have escape on a boat, and by doing so you will miss out on certain entire scenes and encounters with scares. The famous image of the devilish woman from the trailer was an encounter that never occurred in my playthrough. Possibilities of death by not getting a button prompt right or making the wrong decision during dialogue is also much more viable, making you feel like the stakes are high from the get-go, whereas most of these games you literally cannot die during the first 3 or 4 hours. But unfortunately, that is kind of where the positives about this game stop. The negatives about this game, its length and its story, are a lot more present. I already mentioned before that the length cripples the story and its character development, meaning you don't really get to feel anything for these characters at all. Something that does not have to do with the length, but simply a pretty unwelcome mechanic, is a new scenario where you have to push a button prompt to simulate a heartbeat to keep calm. Until Dawn had the same scenario, but instead, one had to keep the PS4 controller completely still. It was a bit of a boring mechanic and one that could easily be exploited by laying the controller down on the table. The new mechanic with pushing the button to the heartbeat creates some new problems. One, you are focused on the line simulating the heartbeat the entire time and kinda miss what is happening visually on the screen. When regular QuickTime events happen, the button prompt appears somewhere on the screen, usually somewhere in the middle, meaning you are aware of what is happening visually despite being focused on what next button prompt will pop up. The other problem is that if you miss the heartbeat by one button press, you immediately will fail the segment. The issue here is that as the words "keep calm" appear on screen, the A button, which is the button I had to press on my Xbox controller, also appears, and as a reflex, I immediately press it, since that is what you expect from a QuickTime event, but by then, you still had to wait until the first heartbeat counter had to appear, and thus, I failed the keeping calm event for being ready to quickly push a button in case a QuickTime event popped up to save my life. This could have been done better by having the text "keep calm" appear longer on screen before a button prompt would appear to be ready. And then there are the scares. You might think at first that this is quite positive, but in all honesty, the scares in Man of Medan are very cheap and fail to impress most of the time. Until Dawn had some very cheap scares as well, there's no question about that, but some of them were absolutely excellent and legendary. Like the Wolverine that jumps out of the cabinet right as you grab a can of deodorant, or the ghost that hurls at the screen after you've opened a door to a room that is seemingly empty. Some of these exact scares are in this game as well, and you see them coming sometimes from a mile away. When you are scouring the plane wreck, you obviously expect some creature to jump out at you, and that indeed happens in the exact same way it does with the ghost from Until Dawn. You even recognize the exact same camera angle and movement, and thus it fails to impress or scare when something does indeed pop up. And there are a lot of jump scares in this game, and the problem is that since the game is so short, that the tempo in which these jump scares occur is very high, to the point where there are so many jump scares right after each other, you kinda grow numb to them. This time you are dealing with apparent ghosts on the ship, and therefore the rules of physics do not apply, like they did in Until Dawn, though the Wolverine in a closed cabin is also questionable, but I digress. This means that some of the scares are just created out of thin air and feel cheap and unearned. A great example is a sliced off head that suddenly falls out of the sky with a loud noise, and when the character that sees this calms down, you see that he or she mistook a fallen over vase for a severed head. It's cheap scares that a lot of ghost movies do, and I simply do not find them scary or work. What are some great scares though are figures or things you start to notice as the camera pans by, or something in the background suddenly moves that was always there, but you just didn't see it until it moved. There's a few good scares in there, but overall the scares are very disappointing. In the end, I was entertained with Man of Medan, but not to the point where I immediately wanted to go back and replay it again. It lacks in story, character development, and scares. Things it does do well though are giving more severe consequences for choices that you make, and the tempo is higher so things start to pick up quicker, which some will like. I would recommend this game if you want to experience one of these games in co-op though. I think there are better alternatives, including Until Dawn or Detroit or even Heavy Rain for that matter. In the end, Man of Medan gets a 6.8. What I am more excited for though is the next game that will come out in 2020 for the Dark Picture Anthology. The next game involves an actor I actually really like and a different setting from what we've seen before. I will do a review of that one as well when it comes out. Unfortunately, it already had a point against it if were to be the same length and the same price as Man of Medan, but we'll see by then how it all comes together.